a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it, the opportunity. I want to ask before we get going here, who's heard of the word gamification before? Okay, pretty high number. I'm going to say now, who feels like they've got, some basic understanding of maybe what that means? Okay, cool. And who feels like they've got a pretty strong understanding of kind of what that means? Okay, fantastic. It's a little bit harder. I'm going to ask you to separate yourself into two camps, if you will. So everybody's got to vote in one of these two places. So on one hand, we have gamification is the next big thing or a big next thing. It holds the key to unlocking engagement and virality amongst users and audiences alike. And the other side of the equation is it's overhyped, not really clear, don't really understand where the value is across other industries, non-game industries, and perhaps skeptical at best. So I want you to put yourself in one of those two camps, okay? So who's in the next big thing camp? Okay, great. And who's in the skeptical at best? I know somebody voted twice, which is allowed. So, I really had no idea how that was going to break down. I've never been involved in a field of study or work that has so quickly gone from non-existent to household word. I did a talk, I proposed a talk on gamification a little before Jesse's, actually, and I did a search. I didn't really know, it wasn't even a word to search for, but I knew, I was working in this field of adding a game layer to a financial product, and I'm wrestling with this, and I realized this would make a great talk. So I searched the word gamification. I got 4 results, not even a page of results. This is 22 months ago. I did it just for kicks this morning, 1.8 million results, right? So it's really hard to know where people are. Everywhere is, from what is gamification, never heard of this, to, oh my God, that's so 2010, right? I think that gamification is, and you probably see this coming, overhyped. It hasn't demonstrated its value across, a significant number of non-game industries, and I think there's actually a backlash coming in the short to medium term. I also think it's the next big thing. I think it does potentially hold the key to unlocking some pretty remarkable engagement, and I'll share with you kind of where this is going already and some of the metrics I think may actually kind of blow people's minds. And what I want to do, my goal here, is to make this kind of actionable. I want you to walk away from here with a new set of distinctions around this idea, so that when you're considering adding some sort of a game-like engagement layer to your products, or someone comes to you with an idea, you have at least a framework to evaluate that in terms of what your goals are. Games are really good at creating sustained engagement, but gamification, I think, has not been traditionally that good. And we'll see if we can all work to create a better definition. So I was born a nerd, and I rapidly discovered games. And this was a lifesaver for me, and ended up, spent a large part of my childhood and adult years playing games, and now I get to kind of, pass that on to my children, who I play games very avidly with. And what's interesting about this is not just that I had a lot of fun playing games, but I was amazed at how much value gameplay has brought to the rest of my life. I'm also, what I describe as a chronic entrepreneur. There's really no cure. I kind of go into remission every now and then. I've essentially bootstrapped a company, ran it for 12 years in the marketing space, and then, have gotten three funded companies under my belt. But even before I was kind of a formal entrepreneur, whether it was mowing, big fields or yards, or shoveling snow, or when I got a little more sophisticated, printing up T-shirts and selling them at concerts, I've always kind of just really enjoyed entrepreneurialism. And throughout that, game layers have been just extremely valuable to me, layers of abstraction on top of my day-to-day existence. In 1980, I discovered a book called Playful Perception, which I highly recommend. It's out of print, but you can still get it used on places like Amazon and eBay. But the subtitle is Changing How You Experience Your World, and it really put for the first time, I think, a set of distinctions, and really kind of enlivened what I'd been doing my whole life. Because, as I'm working in these kind of, I've worked at McDonald's and things like that, and kind of doing, all this activity, I created other game layers around this, right? I would kind of map out in my mind how many rows it would take me to mow, and if I could, nail it, and I would feel really good about that. And I'd go, okay, I'm making $4 an hour. How much is that a second? Okay, how long is it going to take me to make $1 million at this rate, right? And it was the stuff like that that really enabled me to get through my life. And, as again, I was a painful nerd, as I say. And actually, this is very generous. I'd say this is really more the layer that I had to work on first, right? But it was this kind of sense of, this objective layer of measurement that I could kind of put myself into. And, okay, if I breathe 10 times, I'm doing the right thing. Okay, great. If I don't blurt out something stupid. Right? So it was really helpful. As I started to become an entrepreneur in a more formal sense, I built a company that had, in an area that I really didn't have a whole lot of experience with, a market where I had no clients. So I had to do a lot of sales and marketing. And I literally took a map from a game called Diplomacy and blew it up and put it on a corkboard and wrote in all the names of my prospects and essentially engaged in my own kind of campaign of European domination. And it was very, very motivating for me in that sales process. As I got into raising money, I was suddenly raising, by the time at this point in my life, I've raised, 10, 20, 50 times more than I'd ever made in a year of working. And that's a very kind of mentally difficult thing to get over, right? I mean, money has a lot of kind of meaning and connotations. And really, it wasn't until I could create this layer of abstraction where the money was just a resource which was designed to produce more of itself so I could, return to investors and build something, that I was able to be effective at doing this. And this is not unique in business. Air traffic controllers, surgeons, brain surgeons, right? They're not present. You can't be a brain surgeon and realize that if you slip the scalpel, you're going to cause brain damage, or if you kind of lose your attention, you're going to see two planes with 700 people, crash into each other, right? You've got to create a layer of abstraction in order to be functional at your job, because if you're actually present to what you're doing, you're not going to do it well. So game layers worked. Awesome. So along comes this word, this gamification, and this is fantastic. Like now, the world is going to discover what I've done all along, or been trying to work on my whole life. Only very rapidly, the word grew to this giant kind of monster, and this is kind of what we're left with, right? And again, as I say, I just had to make the bubbles big enough so you could read the words. That said, I will say that it's working, right? There's 3 large platform providers. You're probably familiar with them. And forgive me, Badgeville, I just couldn't fit you on the slide. But we're talking about, over 150 million users across these 3 platforms engaging in gamified activities, double the page views or more, double the time on site. Organic virality increases of 30%. Revenue increases by 50 to 250% for these implementations, right? So don't get me wrong, there is some serious business to be done in gamification, but I think we're on the verge of a lot of these things. And again, people in a lot of different places, somebody already sees it this way, see these things this way. Gamification is manipulation. And I think it's because it's been driven largely by a school of psychology, behavioral psychology. Call it, Skinnerian, call it operant conditioning, carrot and stick, stimulus response. But this is, because this was so effective at driving social games and kind of the giant uptake that suddenly social games had over all traditional games. Those techniques have kind of instantly been just ported over to gamification. And you get kind of implementations that are, what I say, spawn of marketing, that are cookie cutter, very similar. And even the ones that are unique, let's say, are often, the word that we use in the gamer world is broken, meaning exploitable or gameable. I'm the mayor of like 4 or 5 places in Seattle, and some of them I haven't stepped a foot in for a year. It was on Foursquare, right? Because they just happen to be on my route as I drive my kids to school. So as I'm going by, I check in, right? And I'm unassailable as mayor in like 4 places, and I do it just to kind of, in some ways, prove that the system is broken. So this really jumped the shark for me. It's really interesting that you mentioned Jesse's talk. So I was there at DICE the year he gave this talk. In fact, right before he went on stage, he said, "So what are you up to?" I said, "I'm adding a game layer to this financial tool." He's like, "Really?" And he gets up and gives this kind of shot heard around the world talk on gamification. A year later, they put this little mini panel together, and this guy you may not know, his name's Brian Reynolds, and he's a great game designer. I mean, he's done some really, really great stuff that anybody that's kind of an old school gamer has played. But he's now become part of the beast. He's a high level game exec at Zynga. And it was at this conference that they were talking, it was basically social games versus gamification. And Brian said, at Zynga, and you guys are all familiar with Zynga, Mafia Wars, Farmville, yes, maybe, no? Okay. People don't like to put their hands up. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're familiar with Zynga games, appreciate it. So he says, at Zynga, we build entertainment products that are, irresistibly compelling and fun. And gamification is about manipulating people to do things that they wouldn't want to do otherwise. And you can see Jesse's expression at this moment, right? And that's when I knew that something had gone horribly, horribly wrong. So I did a talk after this conference called "Gamification Will Eat Itself," and I used the Gartner hype cycle. And you may be familiar with this. It's this idea that trends kind of inflate to this peak of inflated expectations, then they go through this trough of disillusionment, and then if they're lucky, they make it to up the slope of enlightenment to the plateau of productivity. So I talked about this and said this is kind of where we are. And interestingly enough, 2.5 months later, Gartner put out, sure enough, a new hype cycle. And they were actually a little more generous than I was on gamification. But anyway. So, suddenly I looked forward, and this is what I'm starting to see, right? I'm like, wait a minute, this was going to be so good, right? But, this is kind of, it's like dogs and cats living together, So, what's the right road? And that's what I want to focus on for the rest of our time here. And this may get a little bit technical, but I think you guys I'm already impressed with the quality of the crowd, so I think we're in good shape. So here's what I'm going to propose. The gamification is not about extrinsic rewards, manipulation, or the outer shell of what is a game. Like I think of points, levels, and badges as the little tip of the iceberg that you see, right? A game is something much more fundamental. And I think that you need to get there if we're going to create sustained engagement. And the truth is, right, this is kind of the scary fact about games. Like this is what other industries are looking to for their salvation. Right? It's not going to be easy to make something that's compelling and add this additional layer of kind of perhaps boring real world activity. So if we want to talk about sustained engagement, I saw this picture, and this is, for me, this is such a great depiction of sustained engagement, right? When you're skiing or snowboarding or surfing or doing any of these activities, I mean, your legs can be dead tired, you can be cold, and you still get back on that lift, right? And for no other purpose than it's just highly enjoyable and sustainable. So how do we get to that? This is my favorite definition of the game. I give Jane McGonigal credit in her book for turning me on to this quote. But playing a game is a voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. And I think golf is a great example of this. So again, every game has rules, a goal, and a feedback system, right? But it's this kind of voluntary participation that's distinct in the way the user contract that people have when they interact with game versus just about any other media. So the rules of golf are simple. You put the little ball in the hole, right? But it's the obstacles that make it interesting. I'm going to hit it with this absurdly shaped stick. I'm going to stand really far away. I'm going to put trees in the way. I'm going to make the course curve. I'm going to put these sand and water. But that's what makes it engaging, right? That's what makes it so interesting. So in order to do this, right? Oh, here's another way of looking at this. Design is all about simplicity. What's the shortest distance between 2 points, right? If you're in a game contract, this is not the answer, right? That's not a very fun game, right? So it requires a real different way of thinking. Obstacles suddenly are a good thing. You still want to have great principles of design, but, the right obstacles are where the magic happens. Another thing I give Jane McGonigal credit for is this concept of eustress. we think of work as work and, fun as fun, but truly the most satisfying things are often hard work, right? Hard work can be some of the most satisfying activities you can possibly do, and is inherently intrinsically motivating. And whether it's growing something, or in this case, beating a 40-person raid boss in World of Warcraft, the experience of that is actually much more like hard work than playing a game. At least when it launched. Now they've made Warcraft way too easy. Anyway, so I'm going to give you, a couple of key things, and this is probably as technical as we get, psychologically. And can anybody pronounce this name? I'll buy you a drink if you can. But anyway, he came up with this idea that, if something's too easy, it's boring. If something's too hard, it creates anxiety. But if you can provide someone with just the right amount of challenge, and as they learn more, you can provide them with more challenge, right? You can get them in kind of this flow or zone experience that is extremely satisfying. And then kind of Amy Jo Kim, I think, she didn't credit it directly, I think, built on this to say that, the experience that you deliver to a user or an audience member is different at the beginning of the experience than it is at the end of the experience. There's, novelty is very compelling just for the sake of novelty. So learning how to do something is very different once you kind of understand how to do that, and then kind of there's another level of mastery. So you have to look at, whatever it is you've got and go, well, is this something that I really only need to onboard people and that's the only purpose? That's a very different experience from something that you want somebody to come back, 3-6 months later. This is probably my favorite piece. And I'm just going to skip right to the video on this. So I think you guys will enjoy this. Has anybody seen this video, by the way? Hey, not bad. All right. Well, for those of you who haven't, I think you'll enjoy it. So this is a great example in my world of gamification that doesn't have anything to do with points, anything to do with levels, anything to do with badges, but is very domain appropriate. So overnight, or I'll do this with yourself. The corollary to that is, build the right team. If it's about domain specificity, make sure that you've got domain experts. If it's fitness, if it's science, whatever it is, if it's technology, and then make sure that you've got, if not game designers, you've got people that, for God's sake, at least, understand how games work and have played a lot of games on your team. Not this guy, right? Again, a marketing program can only go so far without domain specificity and game designers. All right, this is the most important kind of takeaway. If you take away anything, it's kind of the distinction between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. We all, I think, understand this concept inherently. Most people work to get money. That's great, and that's an absolutely valid reward. There are definitely reasons that extrinsic motivation is very effective. There's also intrinsic motivation, where the activity itself is its own reward. And these, what we find, are very, very powerful motivators. There's a group called Immersive, and they've broken it down into 3 key drivers of intrinsic motivation. Competence, which is feeling good at something, mastering something, learning something new, expanding your capabilities. extremely motivating to people. You can see it all the way down from a toddler trying to walk. Autonomy is about, a sense of freedom and agency and volitional choice, and even more important, that things exist in a higher context that's consistent with your value system. So, I work out because I want to be healthy. That's much more motivating than, I should go to the gym this morning. And relatedness. This is very specific meaning of relatedness, which is the sense that I matter to others and they matter to me. I've seen this described as meaning, but these guys this group has got this down to, I think, a more exact science and is able to measure these three metrics. And when I say that, I mean, they've done a tremendous amount of work. We're talking over 20,000 subjects over the course of 30 years. It's a group of 3 PhDs in motivational as opposed to behavioral psychology. 2 of these guys were literally named to be the top 100 scientists of the century by a group of their peers across all sciences, not the decade, for something called the self-determination theory. And it's because what they found, and actually there's a better way, you don't have to read all that. This is a much better way to kind of talk about it. Having fun in month 1 of some experience is utterly non-predictive of whether that behavior is going to sustain 12 months later. People can report, woo, it was the most fun I've ever had. Doesn't mean they're going to be involved with that 12 months later. If they're getting their needs met, their intrinsic needs around competence, autonomy, relatedness, if they're having experiences, absolutely predictive 12 months later. And actually, this study is actually coming up on its 24th month, and the data still holds as long as you can continue to drive those metrics. This is remarkable stuff, and I mean, at this point, he's doing work with a number of the major game companies, and you're starting to see this stuff kind of build in, and I'll come back to it a little bit. So here's, actually, let me back this up. So again, getting back to this, how do you deliver an experience of competence? Again, if it's too hard, then people feel like they're unable, and they actually create a negative experience of competence. If it's too easy, then they don't feel like they've really accomplished something. Clear, excessive, and we use the word juicy feedback is fantastic for supporting competence. Has anyone ever played the game Peggle? Okay, so in Peggle's a great example. As you hit the last ball in Peggle, right, everything slows down. It zooms in on the ball, and it starts playing Ode to Joy as like rainbows and unicorns start flying across the screen. I swear, it's fantastic. And basically what you've done is you've probably gotten there by bouncing random balls around for a fair chunk of the time. So anyway. When you level, game managers, we're going to have points, we're going to have levels. What does that mean, right? Okay, great, I'm level 7 now, right? If you can enhance somebody's UI, right, all of a sudden they've got a new capability. You've unlocked some content. You've got a new button on my toolbar that I couldn't use before. Now all of a sudden that level has meaning, right? Like, oh, great, I've just increased my competence. Another example is, this is again from World of Warcraft, but at essentially every level, I have a new talent or ability, and if you can bring that into a non-game product, it's very significant. And World of Warcraft are reinforced it 3 ways. You also have virtual goods, which essentially unlock at various levels and bring you enhanced capabilities. So you can use all those things in non-game environments. Again, virtual goods, unlock UI or content. And I forgot the third one, but anyway. Autonomy, so again, this is 2 things. This is the sense that, the world's your oyster, but also that there's a larger there's a larger purpose at work. It's why so many games, ultimately you're saving the world or saving the universe, right? Because again, that gives a context for all your mundane actions in the day-to-day. And then relatedness, can be derived a couple of ways. I mean, when you're playing a one-on-one basketball game with somebody, it is absolutely clear that they matter to you and you matter to them, right? They're reacting to your every move and vice versa. Likewise, when you do something cooperative, some events where it requires everybody's participation, there's a real strong sense of relatedness. These things don't have to be synchronous, right? Words with friends. Anybody play Words with Friends or any kind of Scrabulous? It's a great example of that. What's fascinating is that you don't have to build relatedness between people. Virtual avatars actually proxy quite well from a psychological perspective at getting this need met. So there's a game called Oblivion, where literally as you level your character, when you walk into town, the NPCs, the non-player characters in the environment react to you differently. And they go, hey, there's the hero of Kovac, where they never used to say that when you were kind of a lowly, and that's very, very powerful. And what it does is it actually builds a relatedness between the player and the NPC, and by extension, the developer or the brand. And again, this is something that they've shown in their research. What's fascinating to me about this is that the actual action set of a user can be identical, but their experience of that can be radically different. So the example I love is, when my son was about 6 and we'd take a walk to the playground, as soon as he would see it, right, he would just, he'd take off. And if I could somehow, if I had this magic machine where I could capture what he does and rewind time, record it, I would say, okay, he ran up and he climbed up and he did the slide. And then he did that, he did it again. Then he ran over the bridge, and then he climbed the mountain thing, and he slid down the pole. And if I could somehow record all that and then rewind time, right? And now I'm back, and just as he is about to pull out of my grip, he starts to run, and I grab him, and I come back, and I show him the list. And I say, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to go up the slide, right, and then I need you to do it again. I need you to walk over the bridge, and then you climb up the mountain, and you slide on the pole, and when you're done, I'll give you $1. Right? He might do the exact same set of activities, but his experience of that is going to be radically different, obviously. So we have to move, I think, from this concept, right, to this concept. There's a lot of intrinsic motivation in that zebra, let me tell you. Okay, so establish game as a user framework, number 1. Design for eustress, right, satisfying work and flow. Segment the experience for your users. And these talks are available. You don't feel like you have to take notes. So, you have to embrace the domain appropriately, and you have to focus on satisfying intrinsic needs. And this is the answer to creating sustained engagement with gamification. How are we doing on time? Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, so here's a couple of examples of, I think, really good examples of gamification done right. And it's great, because there's people in this room that have been involved with some of this stuff. So, augmented reality games. Anybody familiar with augmented reality games? Awesome. So I think they do a fantastic job of this, right? There's really rarely any extrinsic value that you're getting out of an augmented reality game, right? But they get armies of people together, and this is really, I think, the first example of kind of wide-scale gamification. For those who aren't familiar, one of my favorite ones is represented by that icon with that strange flag that nobody's would remember, or recognize, but where they literally, talk to me afterwards. It's a 9 Inch Nails program where they took a thumb drive to start the trip down the rabbit hole and put it in a bathroom on the top of a urinal in Barcelona, right, for one of the first concert tours of 9 Inch Nails. So, what would you do if you found a thumb drive on a urinal in Barcelona? Obviously, you'd put it in your computer, right? Because anyway, but sure enough, that's what they did. And there was this track that sounded like it could be a 9 Inch Nails track with this strange, digital signature at the end, which actually decoded into a number, which was half of the puzzle. The other half of the puzzle was they used a heat-sensitive dye on the disc. So you put it into your CD player, and it would be, I forget if it was white or black, but whichever it was, when it came out, because of the heat of the laser, it had suddenly changed color, and there was the other half of the number there, right? And so by putting those two things together, essentially, people, and again, I'm a little fussy with the details, but essentially, I believe that was a phone number ultimately, which then the first 50 people that called got kind of, this put on this bus at a certain time and place, and were taken to see this private 9 Inch Nails show in this warehouse. But that wasn't enough, because halfway through the concert, they had hired, a whole bunch of, guys who were completely buff in military gear, and they came in. It was this kind of post-apocalyptic, visionary album, and they blew out the wall of the warehouse and had these guys kind of swing in on ropes and essentially, take everybody down. And they actually had plants in the audience because they were afraid that people started fighting with them, because there's some of the 9 Inch Nails fans that were at this thing where looked like they would fight. So they planted a couple just just giant guys to essentially run up and challenge and just get like decked and blood on the floor and the whole thing. And it was crazy, right? But again, legendary in what this meant for the fan base. Anyway, I digress. Geocaching. So geocaching is, 2 million unique monthlies. I think it's actually up from that. Doing a location-based game before, location-based games before Foursquare or whatever ever existed. Great example, I think, of adding a game layer to the real world. Nike Plus, I think, is a great example. A hybrid of technology and crowdsourcing in terms of the challenges. People can create their own challenges. I want to run, 211 or I was going to say miles in 2011, and it's again huge amount of engagement and user base. Stack Overflow, these are things I'm not going to really dive into a lot of these, but do a great job of using game layers, engagement layers to manage community and moderation. Priceline is my favorite travel service. It's the only travel service that lets me play a game as I book my travel, and it's very fun. I feel like I've become a ninja. Even this long before the whole campaigns got built around this. Has anyone heard of Magic Quest or Great Wolf Lodge? So this is a fascinating story of guys built a really successful water park and sold it. And had a non-compete clause where they weren't allowed to build an attraction, water park. So instead, they built a hotel where, as a free part of your hotel stay, you get admission to this indoor water park. And very, very successful model. But then they figure, well, what do we do when people don't want to be wet? So they created this kind of magic wand and all these kind of kiosks around that activate. And essentially, now they've created a destination, game site, if you will, and the water park has its own kind of game layer, and now they're expanding into malls, and it's tremendously successful, but still flying under the radar. This is one of the most successful, and if you ask Jesse, anybody that's in game design and wants to make money in gamification right now, these guys are paying, meaning slot machine companies, and if anybody's been to Las Vegas recently, but you can literally take Frodo all the way from the Shire and drop the ring in Mount Doom for only $500 or $600 probably. You play the slot machine game and there's clips from the movie and you're literally following him through this entire epic quest. They built a story, a gamified story into this activity, and it's amazing. You go down there, you see every major property represented. Sex and the City, it's unreal. And these are the types of games that are there, that are packed, right? It's clearly driving tremendous amounts of revenue. They even started to do some things where there's a kind of a social element where 4 or 5 people will be playing on a bank of machines. There's this fishing game. I think it's called Reel 'Em In, which is a little too close for comfort. Can't believe they got away with that. But essentially, you're playing your own game, but then all of a sudden there's like a fishing derby that kind of erupts in the middle of this, and everybody's racing to put their money into their machine and kind of get these jackpots as fast as they can so they can reel in these big fish. Anyway, I'm not saying this is the power of. I think it needs to be with great power comes great responsibility, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it is very effective. Playboy Miss Social, again, apparently very, very successful. Disney did a great job. I don't know if anybody played kind of the Disney Oscar game, but great expanded engagement of how many how long people stayed with the Oscars. Because it can be kind of a grueling 3.5 hours or whatnot. Made a huge difference. And lastly, I'll just because I think it's fun, and because I'm from Seattle and I like Starbucks actually, but they do a fantastic job of delivering on those 3 metrics, right? When I walk into a Starbucks, first of all, massive autonomy, right? I can get everything from an unsweetened green tea, which supports my desire to have make healthy choices, or I can indulge myself with a very, very complicated order. But when I go up there and I nail it, and I go, I'd like an iced venti green tea, 1.5 ounce classic, and they go right away, right? Yes, right. I nailed the order, right? To get my head of confidence. And relatedness, right? If I go to the same Starbucks, they've actually very good at when I show up at the counter, they've got my drink, right? I matter to them. right? And they express that by making sure that I'm well taken care of. And as a result, I'm a sustainable, I'm a frequent and often Starbucks user. So that's basically the gist. I'd like to take a couple of questions. I'll repeat the slide at the end. And before I do, let's see. Let me think. What's the best order? Do you guys like to ask some questions now, or I have a couple of slides that are more fun that I thought I'd throw in there in case I was okay on time. Do you want to see the slides first and then ask questions, or questions? All right. So credits, that's in case this thing. So this is a great example, I think, of an engagement layer with a lot of domain specificity. I thought that was very, very humorous. And then the next one is another one from the fun theory. I think these guys did a great job. Again, this is another Swedish implementation. But we'll watch this video and then we'll take some questions. All right, that's it. Anybody?
I don't need a mic, do I? Hi.
Hi.
You earlier were talking about your child going to the playground and showing the intrinsic joy of jumping on all the different ladders and slides and everything. Can you speak a little bit about the generation where now little kids and television and games are getting people to always do something for reward? Where does that line break where you've got the kids doing something just purely for joy and then now it becomes about a reward, whether it's money or points or Foursquare, whatever?
Yeah. Well, I think, this really gets to the heart of the intrinsic versus extrinsic debate. And don't get me wrong, extrinsic rewards in behavioral psychology and behavioral economics can play a role, I find, particularly in the acquisition step. A lot of times people need a justification, and I speak more of adults than kids. I'll get to the kids' point in a minute, but need kind of a justification. Games are it's fascinating. I notice in language how they're maligned, right? Don't play games with me. There's a sense of kind of wasting your time playing a game, right? So I think the first step is to, and I think this is where I think Mangano was doing some great work, is to kind of shake that up a little bit and say, look, games, and this is the work that Rigby does too, getting these psychological needs met actually makes you healthier, right? It makes you, now you can go too far, but we don't often get wild experiences of confidence, autonomy, and relatedness in our day-to-day work and lives, right? But people are healthier if they get those needs met. So, I think there is a place for extrinsic rewards in behavioral psychology, but I think it also is broken, right? When you look at the time that people like the fall off that people have, especially in some of the earlier social games, which are very, very behavioralist, if you will, right? The life cycle, 30 days is a long time to play Mafia Wars or Farmville, right? And they're starting to make better products that actually do create some intrinsic motivation. But I think that there will be this backlash. It's kind of where I see that potentially that trough of disillusionment coming in, right? Where because extrinsic rewards only work for a very short period of time, typically. Unless the activity is truly rewarding intrinsically, people won't do it because essentially, in very short order, they lose that sense of autonomy, right? They go, okay, I need to click this, 17 times. I mean, this is the point that Ian Bogus, I think, made with Cow Clicker, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but he literally made a game called Cow Clicker, kind of in response to, and literally that's what you did. You'd log on and you'd click your cow, and then it would say, how long until you can click it again, right? And there was a timer that would count down, and then when it was over, you could click it again. And I mean, this thing got, I think he reached a peak that was considerably over 100,000 daily active users, right? At least monthly active users. But it falls off very rapidly. So, I guess my plea is, let's leap as quickly as we can to start driving for intrinsic motivation. It's much more difficult, right? How do you make something that inspires that kind of fun and joy, right? I mean, for every piano stairs and bottle bank, there were some concepts that were okay, right? And so it's trickier, and that's where I've done a lot of. It's where my energy is around. The work of the motivational psychologist, because at least you have some guideposts. And the fascinating thing is that it really does work. I mean, if you can measure. These guys have created a framework for measuring how much competence people feel. They've got kind of extra layers, which is like reliability, immediacy, and density of those experiences. So you can kind of slice and dice those even deeper. And if you can genuinely drive those experiences, you will drive sustained engagement. I don't know if that. Hopefully that answered your question. So, anybody? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you go ahead.
Very interesting analysis of what makes a game compelling and therefore successful. I wonder if you would, just as a device, compare probably the most successful game in the world, chess, with the analysis of these games. How would it stack up?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I definitely will do that. I would actually probably argue that chess is not the most successful game in the world, right? By a long shot, right? I mean, at its peak, 86 million people played Farmville. I think Zynga. I think there will be a time fairly shortly. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of game that actually reaches 1 billion users. Right, and chess doesn't touch that. Right. Well, that's a good point. Well, and I love chess. Like I was a tournament chess player. It was one of my favorite games. It's very much about competence, right? Chess is competence and very focused relatedness, right? So there is autonomy, right? A part of autonomy is engaging in what if thinking. It's the kind of like things are engaging when I'm away from the activity and I wake up and I go, okay, what if I tried this instead of that? Where does that lead, right? What if I solve the problem this way? So in some ways it does kind of has all those elements, right? I mean, clearly you're playing against either a computer or a human opponent that is, if it's at your level. I mean, obviously there's kind of the too easy, too hard, problem, right? But if you manage that and you're playing someone at your level, then it delivers great competence. The autonomy, lives in the what if thinking. But it's interesting. I mean, chess. I can play a game of chess with you, and then I can, reset the board, and I can replay it like both sides. And so it's in some ways there's less autonomy. There's no random element in chess. And yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm probably rambling, but yeah.
That's a game that you can play all your life.
Sure.
Different levels, related to different people.
Absolutely.
It operates in a very logical way. So what's missing that these games are providing, which
yes, fair enough. I think chess provides definitely hits all the metrics. I mean, that's the short way to say it, right? So cool. Got 5 more minutes.
Thanks, Scott. Yep. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. So we've got one of the things that everyone touches on is the ethics of gamification, and you spoke about that, the responsibility there. A question is that we're sort of seeing this on the east coast of Canada right now with your mention about slot machines. They're called video lottery terminals in that culture. They are particularly interesting because 95% of all gambling addictions are addicted to those devices because they have so perfectly mastered the values that the gamification needs to endorse that addictive behavior. My question is, the only way we're able to deal with that issue is to just ban those products and in a government regulation, and to say that we have to get rid of those devices. Do you see that part of the trough of disillusionment may involve some type of regulation in the gamification sphere? And if so, how would we ever implement something like that to talk about ethical gamification?
A softball. Yeah.
It was a good talk.
Don't try and make friends. Yeah, I'm as I say in all my funding talks as well. I'm not a CPA, an MBA, an attorney. My degree is in fine art. I'm utterly kind of unqualified on a legal perspective and even a public policy perspective. I guess. I would actually argue that gambling and slot machines in general is very compelling, but actually typically don't have a lot of autonomy, right? I guess I do think there potentially is a point where money, winning money is involved, where I do think maybe there is a role for regulation. I think that there's a lot of green space before we get to that point, right? And I think that, and I guess I don't really, I guess I use it as an example just because I think I watch it being effective, and people are always looking for, well, what's a really good example of gamification, being used effectively? But I haven't really focused that strongly on unwinding the mechanics of game meets gambling, right? I'm much more interested. For me, the spaces that I think hold the most promise in the short run are health and wellness and finance, right? I think that there's certain areas. The way we look at what we do is our epic quest is financial capability, right? Which encompasses financial literacy, financial responsibility, and actual having more dollars or to spend in the things that matter to you. So kind of working on your value system. And I think there's something really meaningful there. There's something really meaningful around health and wellness. I think, and they've had dramatic results. Immersive does consulting with people who need to be on prescription drug programs, right? At creating, I forget there's a term for it, but essentially a medical term for keeping people on their medicine, remarkably successful, right? So which again has some pretty major impact on the outcomes for those folks. But so I'm going to dodge that question.
Something like eBay got an element of gamification in it with my partner always gets cross with me when I say I want something. She said, "You bought it." I want it.
Yeah.
Is that built on? Is there something in there of that?
I definitely think so. That's for me. That's Priceline too, right? I don't know if you ever use Priceline, but you literally bid for your hotel room or your flight, and you're really excited when your bid gets accepted, and you don't really know. And they have some interesting algorithms. So yeah, I definitely think so. And there's also, I think, there's some other light gamification layers on eBay, just in terms of reputation. People essentially are very, they work very hard. I think almost to an obsessive degree to keep their feedback clean and to get as many stars as they can. And the thing that's interesting about that is those are kind of points, levels, and badges, but they're meaningful, right? Because people look at that and they go, well, no, hey, if you've got 100% clean feedback and 72 ratings, that's great. So that's a perfect example, I think, of where what again, the surface level, the tip of the iceberg, this kind of star-based rating system actually has real-world relevance, right? And I think is why I think it's successful for them. Okay, well, I'm getting the hook. So I'll be around the whole conference. Feel free to come up to me anytime you want.